Refo arrived, Jorgen tired. He had fallen asleep once more. He found himself there in front of the forest, a frightening place. In fact, he could feel it in his bones, that it was frightful, yes, yet beautiful and ever dark, yet misting as it was, the haze of fog overtaking the edges of the forest floor and then hovering some there just above, the cold drip of rain easing out of the heavy clouds that too loomed overhead. It cleared the air a bit, giving its smell that of a fresh morning dew. Of course, this only heightened Refo's senses, and he could feel himself drifting away into the mist, a spectre there as he now stood, Jorgen alongside him in front of the forest. Where he would begin his search for Grandin Obscurus, he was uncertain. Nonetheless, he and Jorgen continued. The carriage in front of the forest there remained sitting, waiting for their return, and as they had just begun to scour the trees throughout the dense mist, Refo could not help but to look back, to catch sight of the carriage standing in wait. In a moment he wished to return to it, out of fear, but he did not, as he could not, for he had to continue forward to press his search. It was interesting to Refo that he would find a clue so easily, so smoothly. Though perhaps that was Jorgen's gift, as had it not been for his friend, it would not have been a near impossibility to have spotted the small torn banner which did sway to the smallest of breezes. This was so, as Jorgen had seen it first, and perhaps with his oversight, his habit of overlooking, he would not have even thought to have looked up to the branches of the small thing swaying. Its colors tattered a steel blue, icy as the day, with an emblem as dark. A bear's head it was, a black bear's head. Something that Refo actually admired. It was strong and it sent a message. Should any bandits, marauders, or the like approach the grounds, it would have been something to see, Refo nonetheless imagined. With that finding, Refo and Jorgen, they made their way. The first sight that they saw, of course, was that of trees where perhaps there should have been none. Refo, in fact, turned to Jorgen and said to him, "You must notice." "I do," Jorgen replied. "No trees," Refo nodded. Jorgen nodded back. "Yes. No trees. Why are they not cut to the forest floor?" Refo muttered to himself, though Jorgen caught it. "He must have begun inwards," Jorgen sighed. "There should be no trees," Refo repeated. "But further in," he nodded. "We must see." With that remark, they began to walk further inwards, towards what was presumably yet the outskirts of the forest, but inner rather than outer. Perhaps even this was a camouflage of sorts. Grandin was a clever man, and Refo knew that these parts were sometimes, perhaps oftentimes, filled with dangers and mysteries. Like that of the terror bird. Refo tried not to think of it, though he failed, and thoughts of that great bird, that great terror, that terrific horror, did for but moments fill his mind with thoughts of conjured and desperate nightmare. Though they soon dissipated along with the mist, and as it cleared, the forest floor became plain and easily seen, even to Refo, who, of course, often overlooked much in the way of items and things. Easily enough he found his next clue, as it were. "A hammer," Jorgen muttered before Refo could say anything. "And bloodied," Refo said. There were pieces of something lying next to it, and upon further inspection, Refo soon discovered that they were of the skull, pieces of bone, and with matted, bloodied hair strands lying around them. "Somebody was killed here," Jorgen said, astonished that they had stumbled upon such a find so quickly, or at all. Refo only nodded, suppressing his stomach, which had the urge to churn. He thought he would surely vomit after having seen such things, though to his surprise he did not. Unsurprisingly, he wondered about his mother, though he doubted no. He knew this was not her, as the hair was a brown and not a black, though it had darkened some in the dirt, the strands that lie there. Refo picked up but a strand, eyed it, and placed it gently back upon the ground. He rested his hand on it and said, for the moment alone, "I wonder who killed you." "Who do you think she was?" Jorgen interjected. "She," Refo repeated his friend. "You think she was a she, then?" Jorgen nodded, pointing. "The hair, it's quite long." Refo shrugged. "Men have long hair as well." Jorgen shrugged back. "Some, not many. Not in the city, anyhow." Refo stood staring at the skull, its broken pieces. "Perhaps you're right." Jorgen sighed and Refo grinned. "Should we continue?" We shouldn't, Jorgen smiled back. Yet, Refo said, and with that and a gesture with the arm, Refo made his way, Jorgen following alongside through the yet misted trees of the western forest, its darkly trees swaying to an inexistent breeze. Perhaps Jorgen had been right about the terror bird, Refo dared to think, and perhaps, once more, and perhaps he also thought perhaps its great wings now flapped against the forest trees whilst it flew about in some great distance away. Or so he hoped that it was some distance, if that were the case. Perhaps it was close, he again dared think. Jorgen sensed Refo's fear and voiced his very thoughts. You worry about the tail, I told you, Refo, he smiled, a chuckle readied. Perhaps we will have the great fortune to meet her. Perhaps you will, Refo corrected him. I make no such plans. Of course, Jorgen said. You run and I will fight. Refo shrugged. Sounds a good deal to me. They laughed a moment, though in their laughter one could sense a dire fear within the both of them, but stifled were their voices, as pressing onward they marched. Perhaps, Refo thought, perhaps it would have been easier yet for him to continue on like that, darkly and sickly now in the forest, if yet he could not see, though it was not so that he was incapable of sight, and no, he could easily see, and as he watched, as he looked out, what he saw was something darkened. A figure. It stood just beyond him, black and encapsulated in shades. He knew just having looked that this figure could not be real, though looking to Jorgen, his friend's eyes wide in nightmarish dismay. Refo knew whatever this figure, it was real or it must be. They caught themselves, the two, stopping in their tracks to watch as the figure paced from side to side in front of them, and as they spoke in fear. Ghoulish it is, Jorgen breathed, the first to speak. Horrific, Refo countered. It was but a moment the ghoul, whose eyes grew red and white in the darkly forest, its form yet clear, stepped nearer them and revealed itself in its entirety. And terrific, Refo added, as the ghoul, this figure, had revealed herself to be a woman, or something akin to one, and beautiful she was, indeed, though Refo was clearly skeptical of her, and now somewhat uninterested, or acting so. He was here to accomplish something, to perhaps find his dead mother, and not for this vampire. He spoke up. Tell me, said Refo, his voice shakier than he would have liked. Tell me what it is you're wanting from us, vampire. The woman chuckled at him and replied, Vampire. You must be, Refo grumbled, with eyes like those. She smirked, yet pacing. Perhaps. Tell us, then, Refo said, fixing his gaze upon her and peering directly into her dilating pupils. Tell us what it is you would like from us. Perhaps I want you, Refo, she smirked. Her voice was cutting. Perhaps I want you, Jorgen. Perhaps we will kill you, Jorgen replied hastily, obviously astonished that she knew their names. As he was a strong and confident fellow, though he abated as soon as Refo eyed him. The vampire, whatever she was, only chuckled. You could not kill me, young Jorgen. And all of a sudden she stopped her pacing, extending her hand to her sides as she said it, giving Refo a feeling of such dread that to explain it would have been nigh near impossible, and he had good reason. As after but a moment, it would seem that a ball of energy warped into the shape or form of a sword, did appear in her hand. She whispered something in incantation, her eyes ever red. Jorgen yelled something, but Refo, who had more sense, said something else. Run, he whispered. What? Jorgen yelled. Run.